Welcome to the Questionistas podcast. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Spencer.
Quick disclaimer, this is for education and entertainment purposes only. If you need help, please see a professional. We are not doctors, nor experts, nor dragons. We do not give medical advice. Take our words with a gallon of salt.
Hey, Thomas, so what's the question today?
The question is, how do I make my expectations better match reality?
Last week, we talked about feedback, and we teed up that we were going to talk about feedback this time. What do you mean by expectations and reality, and how does that relate to feedback?
Yeah, well, first, technically, feedback from other people is a type of feedback from reality. And so when I say from reality, I mean the universe. So an important thing for learning in general is to have what's called a good feedback loop.
How does that relate to expectations and reality?
Okay, awesome. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this as well is we sometimes want the universe to work a certain way, and then it doesn't. One thing I like to joke is when I'm trying to make something work, I'm like, stupid inanimate object, why do you keep doing what I'm making you do instead of what I want you to do?
Okay, so
stupid drill. Why are you doing what I'm making you do, what I'm actually make happen, instead of what I want to happen, which is just magically drill a hole in this thing?
Yeah. So there's feedback from reality, from the existence of just the universe that we live in, and then there's feedback from people. So this time we're going to talk about things that we really can't control. But
how many times have we, like for you, Spencer, how many times have you tried to do something with, fixing a car, doing something in your house, doing something with a computer, and the results you get are different than what you want?
Sure. Right now have to fix some plumbing and I don't want to fix it, but every time I touch it and mess with it, it ends up getting worse than I expected because I don't know that much about the plumbing that I'm dealing with. But I keep banging wrenches against pipes, hoping that it's going to fix itself.
That's something I think about every time I try to do something around the house. I'm always like, wow, I had a simple version of how this works in my head. And now I'm beginning to understand why there's people out there whose entire jobs, entire careers are how to put up framing on a house, or how to do electrical, or how to do plumbing. Because this kind of actually relates to my little principle that I named. And I call it the complexity weirdness dilemma, which is we imagine how things work. And even if we know that they're more complex, we often think, oh yeah, that's just more layers. But usually the way that reality works is weird and quirky in ways that we can't anticipate. So for example, your plumbing. You don't know enough about it to know, oh, when you're hooking this thing to that thing, you actually have to use this type of glue. You have to use this type of glue in this order, or it won't work. There's all these funky little edges of reality that don't care what you think. They just are.
Well, and even more complex is, I think I understand how the plumbing should work, but I'm thinking about plumbing in this day and age, but my house was built 50 years ago. And the way they did things back then, I have no knowledge about, but a plumber would go, oh yeah, everyone did it this way. It's really dumb. We've moved past that, and let me just.
Here's the workaround that we always do for a house this old.
Right. Yep.
So part of the aspect of that with expectations is it brings up to a really important principle, which is intuition. So first reaction, Spencer, when you hear the word intuition, what do you and your impression of what do other people think it means?
Well, I think gut feeling. I think sixth sense, that I'm gonna be able to know the information without any prior information or knowledge about it, that it just will come to me.
Yeah. And when people say You just got to follow your gut. You just got to follow your intuition. What kind of value are they placing on your gut and your intuition?
They're placing a huge value on it. Obviously, is I think what you're getting to, but one of the thoughts about that is manifesting, which I have a lot of feelings about, and we can talk about it on another podcast, but is just like, well, just manifest your gut feeling into existence and it'll occur, and it'll be how the world acts. I want to manifest the crap out of my pipes right now because I do not want to deal with a leak in my walls.
So when you're working on your pipes and you keep running into these weird little issues, that's because there's a lot of things that if we don't understand them and we know they're more complex, we just think it's got more layers. But in reality, when you actually learn about those topics like electrical or plumbing, it's not just more things, it's weird and quirky things that you can't just guess. I was having a conversation online with somebody once where they were talking about artificial intelligence, and they're like, if they keep making the computers more complex, then they'll be able to do the same thing as human consciousness. I'm like, that's not just complexity, because we've got the way synapses work and the different brain chemicals work. So there's a lot of weirdness it's not just more complex, it's weird. So the plumber who's been doing that job their whole lives, they've learned a lot of the weird complexities. Like if you're trying to fit this thing to that thing, then you need to sand it this way and use this type of glue and use it in this order. And it's an example of your simpler model not matching reality.
Yeah, and for my plumbing situation, I'm thinking about plumbing as I see online because I can pull up YouTube videos, but my house is 50 years old. And so the way the weirdness of a 50-year-old house and the way the plumbing was set up 50 years ago is what I'm tackling. And I don't know any of that weirdness, but a plumber comes in and goes, oh yeah, 50 years ago we used to do this. It's really dumb now. We don't do that anymore, but let me just go boop, 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 and bang the wrench on the pipe a different way. And they've got it fixed way faster than I ever could.
It's like some sort of arcane ritual that they know the step to. It's the plumbing gods or whatever.
Yes, and some days trying to watch them work is wizardry of that I'll never understand. Right.
I one day when I was fighting with my weed whacker, I made a little note to myself that said, anybody who knows how to use a weed whacker deserves a living wage. Because that's some skill, bro. Some skill that people really take for granted. So that relates to the appeal to intuition, which we're kind of talking about models of the world. For a second, we were talking about models of the world that you can hold in your head. Like you have, here's how I imagine plumbing to work. But intuition in that case is also like how you drive a car, how you stand. So there are some things that are like built in biologically, but the point I'm trying to make is intuition or your gut can be a liar unless it's been trained on accurate data with a short feedback loop. And what I mean by that is your intuition without any training is only as good as the biases you come with. And those evolved, first off, not to be right, but just to help you survive. So intuition or your gut does not have some magic thing that helps you to automatically be more likely to be doing the right thing.
Okay.
Again, we evolved, our brains or our biases evolved to help us survive. They didn't evolve to help us to be right. Now, there are places where those have to overlap. Like what kind of food you eat, or if you exercise, or if you drink water. There's a lot of places where it doesn't, like the socioeconomics of a nation. We can have all sorts of irrational thoughts or incorrect thoughts about the socioeconomics of a nation because we don't have a tiny short feedback loop to teach us, oh, your idea that, you know, absolute capitalism or social medicine or whatever, I'm just using examples. I'm not saying these are right or wrong. I don't know, maybe I am. you don't have a tight feedback loop to actually find out if you're right about those things.
So I think I want to jump in and suggest something that's happened this week in social events, and I'm intentionally being vague on it, but is cognitive confirmation bias. I think the operative word in that statement about accurate data to make sure your gut's not a liar is a short feedback loop. And so the quicker that I can acquire a confirmation bias, the tighter and shorter that feedback loop is, and then the quicker I can be ingrained in my thought process. And one of the things that I saw was an event occurred in the United States this week, and both sides of the political spectrum immediately started making statements about how and why and what happened.
Everybody created a story.
Everyone created a story, and then you can flip through TikTok or Instagram or any social media, and you can listen to 100 people confirm the story that you're looking for.
And yeah, that you want to believe.
And so that reality, regardless of actually seeing the information about the event and watching it unveil firsthand, you can watch a whole bunch of people confirm what you want to believe, what you wanted to believe in the beginning. And thus we're creating a short feedback loop, but at the risk of actually not thinking through or not actually.
Yeah, you're making a short feedback loop, but part of that principle was the gut is a liar unless it has been trained on accurate data with a short feedback loop.
Yeah.
Because if it's trained on bad data,
then you're only going to be deeply ingrained in what you're currently doing. Then the next question is, how do we develop a better intuition, a better gut trained on accurate data? I think the short feedback loop is not the hard part, especially with modern technology pushing ideas on us at any time. But how do we make sure that we're maintaining good data?
That's really hard, especially if you're going to talk about world level socioeconomics and what kind of public policy we should be voting for. People like to say humans are very irrational.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain people on a certain side of the political spectrum. Actually, maybe I'm only saying this because a lot of them are my friends, but it probably happens on all sides. The people on the other side are so dumb. Why aren't they logical? Why don't they listen to facts? Why are they so driven by emotion? It's like, sorry, bro, that's everybody. But also, they're so irrational. First thing is that the person saying that is also irrational, but humans actually are very rational when it comes to beliefs and actions that have that tight feedback loop with good data, like touching a hot stove.
Okay.
But again, which legal policies to vote for and the meaning of life and morality can have such a broad feedback loop that we can have plenty of ungrounded beliefs.
Right.
And that's fine. I mean, that's natural, but the first thing that you can do, we were talking about people coming up with stories, right?
Sure.
The best thing you can do to start is to start with the assumption that your intuition about the universe is either wrong or incomplete. And anytime a good sounding story pops in your head, pause and go, okay, what other explanations could there be for this? How would I find out what those other explanations are? What would I need to know to find out which explanation is the most likely? Because you can't get it perfect, but even if you just take a minute and say, my gut instinct is not automatically right, the story that's in my head is at least incomplete, like the mental model in your head about how plumbing works, you're not going to be as frustrated with the universe not working the way you want if you go in with the assumption, I don't know everything about how it works. And for a lot of people, that assumption is like subconscious, but it's there. We all think naturally that we understand how everything works. And then, the stupid thing doesn't screw into the wall.
Yeah.
And then we have other biases to protect us that make it harder for us to learn from that experience. We start coming up with other stories about why it didn't go into the wall. And we're like, oh, well, it was a bad screw. It was the drill was being funky, or just plain getting mad and being like, this should be working. Stupid reality. Why aren't you doing what I want? You are disappointing me.
Is that word disappointment I want to hold on to just for a second, because is that where some of our fallacies come into? Name the fallacy that basically drives us into rejecting reality because we're disappointed with currently what the state of reality is. I don't know if there's an answer to that.
There's probably a name for that fallacy and that bias.
Because it feels like confirmation bias of just, I'm disappointed with how reality is working, and so I'm going to seek out information and justify the existence of why things are happening, and God must hate me. I must be cursed because that one time I kicked a puppy 20 years ago.
You picked a puppy 20 years ago?
No, I didn't. I'm just saying this hypothetical person kicked a puppy and they're a bad person. And that's why they're being cursed today with a screw. So then we're not rational, but we are rational. We're intuitive, but we're not intuitive. I've got one statement here. The problem is that until we are trained, we can't tell the difference between rational and rationalizing. Even that it is a skill, you will never be perfect. Yep. Talk to me about rationality versus rationalizing, because I think that's kind of what we're touching on here.
Yeah, it is kind of what we're touching on. And again, it's this whole expectations versus desires, reality versus the model in your head. The difference between rationality and rationalizing, or being just and correct and justifying, is that if you're doing things more correctly, rationalizing and justifying are things you do after the fact to explain why things failed, but then your explanations never help you be more effective in the future. If they're helping you be more effective in the future, then that's rationality. Then that's being reasonable. If they just explain the past, then that's just you explaining things away. So I guess what I'm saying is you got to test your explanations against reality. And if they help you be more effective, then that's good. The one tool, and it's kind of at the end of our notes, but I want to talk about it now before we go into the cognition of learning and some other tools that help you actually do this, is holding tentatively to your theories. Just because you know that your knowledge is either wrong or incomplete, you need to hold tentatively to how you think how things work. So, like, okay, I have a theory that this is how it works. Oh, it turns out to be something else. All right, I'm going to roll with it. Just got to roll with the flow, man. And then you won't just be bashing your head against reality. Like, if you have some lifelong goal, like say you've wanted to be a writer or you want to exercise more, and you keep saying, I should have more discipline, I should just write, I should just eat better. That is you fighting against the reality of how your motivation works. You need to learn to work with the reality of how your motivation works, because this leads us into learning. There are multiple types of learning. There's non-associative, associative, and we often think about one type only, which is punish bad behavior, reward, or ignore good behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many other types of conditioning Like, have you thought about rewarding yourself when you don't do a bad behavior? Have you thought about taking away something you like when you don't do a good behavior? Or there's so many different combinations. And that's just one type of conditioning.
I think about the way I've learned to train my dogs, and how I think humans are just one or two sections away from how dogs are trained, because you communicate in a way. I need you to do this. Put your paw here. Put, lay down, sit up, stand up, run, fetch, whatever. And I'm going to reward you, but each dog is motivated by different rewards, and so some are motivated by treats, some are motivated by just verbal confirmation, and then you constantly reinforce that. And but it's really fascinating how I think that's essentially establishing a tight feedback loop with the animal to get them to understand, this is what I want you to do. But you're not doing it once or twice. Even over time, you need to constantly reinforce that. You're constantly maintaining a feedback loop at the end of the day.
So a lot of things we're talking about here are the associative step of learning.
Okay.
There's 3 stages to the procedural learning model. And the first one is cognitive. So let's say you're trying to learn a new skill. I think trying to drive a car is a good example, or say learning how to hit a baseball. The cognitive step is where that conscious part of your mind is doing a ton of work.
Okay.
You don't have many instincts or skills or habits built up. So think about when you're first learning how to drive, and you're just like, okay, got to check this mirror, got to check that mirror, got to push on the gas, got to turn the thing. And then over time, you keep doing those actions and you see how they work. There's that feedback loop. That's the associative stage. In fact, you mentioned the word associating with your dogs. So the associative stage, we're talking about taking advantage of that. That is trying different things and seeing how they work. Trying different things and seeing how they work. Sometimes my son gets frustrated because he's like, oh, I can't do this. And I'm like, that's because you're in the associative stage. You don't know the quirks. You don't know the weirdness. You don't know the specific steps you need to make something happen. And the only way to do that is to play in the associative stage for a long time. But after a while, the subconscious part of your brain starts picking up those patterns and digging them into your subconscious. And now you drive, and all of a sudden you get to your office and you have no memory really of driving there. And that's because your intuition, your subconscious, just took over. You trained it. It knows what to do. Now somebody swerves out in front of you. You probably don't necessarily have a ton of experience with people swerving out in front of you. So there's going to be some more cognitive stuff there, but you still have autonomous reactions kicking in to help you there. Like, oh gosh, to be honest, we have instincts about not getting hurt that are built in that react faster than we could think. Like, say you step on something pokey.
Mm-hmm.
They've measured this. You are reacting before your conscious brain has time to process that it was happening. Like you go, oh, the flinch is faster. But again, you are using some of those automatic built-in instincts, but then you're training them in different ways. Like, for example, doing a baseball bat, or actually, this is a better one, learning to shoot a basketball. If you stand at one spot and try to shoot the basketball over and over and over again, you will start to learn things, but you'll actually learn faster if you change where you're shooting from. Because that's the associating different actions with different results. And then you start to get a feel for not just a very narrow part of shooting a basketball, but you start to understand, oh, if I'm over here, then I can't use the backboard like that. But so much of this just becomes autonomous.
And it sounds like that you're accounting for all the weirdness of, you know, what you think is a simple hoop and backboard, but is very complex based on every single place that you're at.
Yeah, one incredibly challenging example of this is golf, which is one of the reasons I think, I don't know if I just heard this, the only people who are interested in watching golf are people who sometimes play golf, because they know they're in that cognitive associative stage almost all the time for like the basic swing of golf. And they watch these people who are like performing it like super well, and it's like, do you know how hard it is what that guy just did?
And I think I must not have played enough golf to appreciate it, because man, that sport is boring.
Yeah, it's like you got to have your feet at the right spot. You have to rotate your knees, your hips, your shoulders, your arm at the right angles and at the right times. If it's wild. Like I don't play golf, but I have done a few golfing activities before, and I'm just like, this is insane.
Yeah. It's fun. It's fun to play. To be honest, I mean, it's very satisfying. And in some ways, I think that reward system that comes out of just once you do connect with the ball, you're just like, holy cow, I totally shanked that into the woods, but man, that was beautiful. And was that fun? And it's an interesting idea of, do you need to stay in autonomous? Are you better suited not to be on autonomous types of learning stages? Should you try to maintain cognitive and associative learning stages with good feedback loops, or is that
golf is actually another good example of that, or tennis. My brother-in-law plays tennis, and they talk about going back to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of you going back to the cognitive stage for, say, I'm going to focus on my footwork. So you are almost restarting that learning process back at the cognitive stage for your footwork, which as you try different footwork, you're in the associative stage, and that's updating or revising what you've got in your subconscious. So, and the other thing is, I know people who are like amazing artists, but struggle to explain it to other people. If you want to be able to teach things, you have to keep at least a cognitive awareness of what's happening.
Okay.
Or I shouldn't say necessarily teach people, but in order to verbalize it, because you have people who learn skills and they become autonomous as subconscious, and they're just like the firefighter who, without consciously realizing it, hears a sound and says, "Get out of the room."
Right.
And then the room collapses. The firefighter that's got, 30 years of experience.
Yeah.
He can't explain on a conscious level how that process happened, because it happened through the associative feedback loop.
To the point where it's almost autonomous.
Oh, not almost. It's just autonomous.
Okay.
It's straight. Especially if it's happening without any conscious awareness of it, explicit conscious awareness, you're at autonomous. You're at autonomous with talking. You're at autonomous with walking.
One of the feedback loops that I've appreciated over the years is the feedback loops in video games where you when you fail, and when you fail or you lose a life or you game over and you die,
that means you suck and you need to give up, right?
Right. And that's what you would expect. And yet failure, about 80% of the time, people continue to keep trying again. And there's games that are notoriously hard and there's games that are notoriously easy, but regardless, there's always a failure state. And for some reason, they're able to identify, hey, you failed, click here to try again. And so the failure state has been minimized to a point where we want you to keep playing. We want you to keep trying and either enjoying the experience or to learn and try better next time. Even some of the hardest games, I'm just like, I can't believe I did that. My favorite feedback loops are ones where I realize I'm the one that is at fault. where I realize if I would have just jumped a little bit sooner, then that's on me. The system didn't cheat me. And that reality is established and it's fair, but I just need to be better at learning the rules. I need to improve my cognitive and associative skills by practicing. So we've got effective feedback that must answer 3 questions. Where am I going? How am I doing? And where to next? I think video games do a really good job of that. That notion of know where you're trying to do. You failed at it. You are able to reassess, and a good feedback loop, a good video game. Some games are not good at it, but a good game is able to help you identify. I know what I did wrong. I didn't jump fast enough. And then I know I'm going to try this different trick next time when I get in there. And sometimes, at the beginning, we talked about hitting your head against a wall and saying, oh, I'm trying the same thing every single time. I've been accused of playing games where I feel like, where it looks like, and I feel like I'm doing the exact same thing every single time. And in some ways, you've got to hit your head against the wall 20 times before you can progress. And in some ways, the faster that I can hit my head 20 times, the faster I can move on to actually learn it the right way.
Yeah, it's because you're going through that associative feedback loop over and over and over again in at least slightly different ways, hopefully slightly different ways. What's that phrase? I think it's false, but it says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Mm-hmm. Einstein said it, supposedly.
Yeah, well, first off, that's not the definition of insanity. But second off, if you're doing things over and over again the exact same way and expecting different results, yes, that's you hitting your head against the wall in the exact same angle. But maybe you just need to tilt a little bit to the left, and maybe that wall will get a crack in it. I don't know.
Yeah.
One really important tool I want to talk about is doing it 10 times fast versus 1 time slow.
Okay.
When it comes to a lot of creative projects, where going through the entire process multiple times helps you learn faster than going through the process slowly once. Like, I've talked to people who have been working on their chapter 1 for 5 years. And if their goal is to finish a novel, then their actions do not match reality. Their progress does not match their goals.
But that chapter 1 is going to be killer if you've done it for 5 years straight.
No, it's not. You want to know why?
Why?
Because there's certain things about writing books that you can only learn by going through the whole process multiple times. There are lessons that you are avoiding learning because you didn't go through the entire process. One really good example of this is I saw an interview with Janusz Kaminski, I think. He is a cinematographer. I think he usually works with Steven Spielberg. Gosh, he's probably really old now. But he talked about his time at film school. And he said, every weekend I would go and make a short film. I would go borrow the equipment from the school and go make a short film. My friends would go out and party and play and relax. And they're off, and that's fine for them. And they're off doing other careers. And I'm a cinematographer.
Mm-hmm.
So he went through the process of doing the whole thing over and over and over again. Now, you should actually do both. You should do it 10 times fast, and then maybe once do it 1 time slow. You got to finish it still, but maybe once do it 1 time slow. Spend some more time in that cognitive stage. But that associative stage, there is no amount of cognitive preparation that will make the associative stage shorter. Maybe that's not completely true, but a lot of times, so when I'm thinking about it in this way, I'm kind of likening it to preparing too much before you get started. you cannot get started on that associative stage, meaning trying different things to see different results and then changing what you try. You can't start that too soon. That's what I mean.
Okay. So one note you've got under the 10 times fast, 1 time slow is the attitude of play. And the best definition I've ever heard of play is you have three elements. You have goals, rules, and a magic circle. And the magic circle is time bound and physical bound. And so a soccer field for 90 minutes is a soccer field, and that ball cannot leave those lines. But after the 90 minutes, that ball can go anywhere. It doesn't really matter, right? So that's that magic circle. The goals are the actual goals. The rules are no hands, amongst others. And so play I think is really interesting. Now, I disagree with your statement without expectations of doing it well. I think play has different goals because your goal this time may be to score as many points, but play the second time may be, I'm going to try to see I'm going to count how many times I kick the ball while I'm playing soccer, and I don't really care about. And so there's kind of meta goals that you set up for yourself, which I think ultimately allows you for those 10 times fast that you can play 10 games of a micro game within a soccer game while you're playing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I really like that because I often put emphasis on the expectations of doing something well or right, because that's often been a stumbling block for me. See, for that soccer example, imagine the expectation of doing it well keeping you sitting on the side of the field holding the ball and not going into the field. And that happens with a lot of people, especially with creative endeavors, but with learning something new, they go, I want to do it the right way. And then they just don't do it. They think the choice is doing it the right way versus the wrong way, but their choice is more like doing it wrong at first versus not doing it at all.
Yeah. Well, and that becomes a perfection is the enemy of good in this situation where at some point you maybe playing and video games does as well, the stakes are very low. Like if you lose in a video game, it doesn't say if you lose this time, I'm going to delete the video game and you're never going to be able to play this again. If the stakes are that high, then that would be the stakes similar to living. And it's like, you got one chance to jump across that ledge, because if you don't, then you're going to curse splat. And no one wants to play that game.
But guess what? Your species has had several thousand years to test associatively different bits of DNA and culture and contexts and upbringing to get to the point of making animals and species that either successfully jump across that ledge or don't try it because they're not dumb. So it's almost like, that's probably a bigger note. I'll just put it to the side for a second, but it's like on a species level, it's doing this associative. I mean, it doesn't intentionally do it, but different things are attempted and different things are more successful versus not. And I guess that's one of the biggest things I want to say. I'll let you have a chance to do a few closing thoughts too, is it is what it is, not what you want it to be. You have to learn to change your expectations to meet reality and work with the way that things work. And this includes yourself. This includes the habits and skills that you want to do, the things you're frustrated with about yourself. If you're not changing, if something isn't working, then either you can't do it or you need to do it a different way.
The lingering question I've got is failure actually bad?
I wish that we had either an updated definition for failure or a new word, because failure's got really bad PR. It's got a worse rep than it deserves. That's literally the learning process. Trying it fails or doesn't completely work, and trying it again a different way. That's literally what learning is. Like the very action of, like, say you're trying to like learn dates or memorize a map or something. The action of trying to remember, putting in that effort, failing, and then pulling up the right answer, that process is what makes your brain remember it later. Failure is critical to learning. Your brain will not work as hard to solidify info you're trying to learn without the emotional experience of, oh, I followed a different pathway and it didn't give me the result I wanted.
Sounds like that's a great topic for the next episode.
I like that too. All right, everybody. Thanks. Keep working with reality instead of against it. Be patient with yourselves and keep asking questions.
Have a good day.